Headlines: Korea's ruling party wins landslide victory in parliamentary by-elections, securing victories in 11 of the 15 constituencies. The two leaders of the main opposition party quit over a crushing defeat in by-elections. And a liberal heavyweight, Sohn Hak-kyu, announces his retirement from politics after losing to a conservative political rookie. And the collapse of talks with American creditors sends Argentina into its second debt default in 13 years. Hello and welcome to the show. Live from Seoul, I'm Kang Tae-ri. It was an overwhelming victory for the ruling party in Korea's largest by-elections, winning 11 seats and regaining its majority in the National Assembly. First, our Kim Min-ji has a wrap-up of the results.
The ruling Saenuri party took home 11 out of the 15 parliamentary seats up for grabs in Wednesday's by-elections, regaining majority at the National Assembly. In the hotly contested race of Seoul's Dongjak-bi district, the ruling party's former Seoul mayor candidate Na Kyung-won secured a ticket to parliament after defeating her unified opposition rival Do Hae-chan. In the Suwon-si district of Gyeonggi-do province, opposition candidate and political big name Sohn Hak-kyu bowed out to conservative rookie Kim Myung-nam. In the Suwon-D district, the opposition's Park Kwang-won, a former journalist, came out the winner against his ruling party rival and chief of staff to former President Lee Myung-bak, Im Tae-hee. The ruling party swept the other three capital area districts, including Gimpo, where the ruling party's Hong Cho-do tasted victory against liberal political veteran Kim Do-kwan. Securing all of the two seats in its traditional stronghold of southeastern Gyeongsang region, the ruling party also took all three seats from the central Chungcheong area. As for the opposition, it won 3 seats from the political base of southwestern Jeolla region. But the fourth seat in the Suncheon-Goksong district was claimed by President Bak's close aide Lee Jung-hyun, the first time ever by a ruling party candidate. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
And to take responsibility for the main opposition's crushing defeat, the party's leadership has resigned. Choi Yoo-sun reports.
Apologizing for their party's crushing defeat in Wednesday's by-elections, the co-leaders of the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy have stepped aside after just 4 months at the helm.
I take all the responsibility and will resign as party co-leader. I will work to make sure our party carries out major reforms to regain the public's trust.
Former independent presidential candidate An Cheol-soo, who had ascended to party leadership after merging with the main opposition Democratic Party in March, said he too would do his best for the good of the party as an ordinary member. All other members of the party's Supreme Council followed their co-leaders out the door, claiming responsibility for the election loss. The leaders had been heavily criticized for causing friction during the nomination process and thereby lowering the party's chances of a good showing in the poll. Floor leader Park Young-sun now assumes temporary leadership of the party. She, along with an emergency committee, will seek ways to help the party rise from the ashes and elect a new leader. Different factions within the party are expected to elbow for position in the process. The one who's likely to be most affected, however, is An Cheol-soo. Once considered a political sensation and a presidential hopeful, An missed out on a valuable chance Wednesday to prove his reform-minded leadership in the party. And on Thursday, a bigwig within the opposition bloc, Sohn Hak-kyu, who lost a seat in the capital region to a ruling party newcomer, announced his retirement from politics. Sohn was considered a potential presidential candidate, and his retirement is expected to affect the dynamics of the opposition's next presidential campaign. Choi Yoo-sun, ARIRANG News.
And moving forward, the ruling party is likely to take this outcome as a go-ahead for the government's push to boost the economy and to carry out reforms. Ji Myung-gil reports.
President Park Geun-hye has been given the green light to get busy running state affairs for the rest of her term. The ruling Saenuri Party's unexpected landslide victory in Wednesday's by-election has given the government a mandate to rebuild itself in the wake of April's ferry disaster and pursue its stated goal of economic revival.
The people voted for the Saenuri Party because the public felt the urgency to reform the country and revive the economy.
The governing party promised to support President Park in carrying out her national reform drives and not to use politics to divide the people.
The Saenuri Party will denounce any form of regionalism that is deeply rooted in Korean politics and will work toward bringing about national unity.
The ruling party's new chairman, Kim Moo-sung, is expected to use the election win as a mandate to carry out a complete overhaul of the party. With no elections scheduled until 2016, Kim has ample time to make his mark. It is also possible that he may equalize the nature of the relationship between the party and the presidential house of Cheongwade. The ruling Saenuri Party now has 158 seats in the 300-seat National Assembly. The main opposition party has 130. Kim Young-gil, ARIRANG News.
For the latest in news that impacts Korea and the world, join Kang Chae-ri for a lively half hour that covers politics, business, international news, and much more. Live at 8 every weeknight on ARIRANG TV.
Human Rights Council headquarters in Geneva on Thursday, finding ways to persuade. Government measures to revitalize Korea's housing market, mainly easing household loan regulations, are set to take effect on this Friday. But as our Kim Ji-yeon reports, it could add to the mounting household debt issue in the country, especially for the older generation.
Some government regulations on the housing market are being eased starting Friday, and the Korean economy is expected to start feeling the effects in the latter half of this year. The changes include easing measures that limit the amount that people can borrow from banks when buying a house, depending on various economic variables, including income. The loan-to-value and debt-to-income, or LTV and DTI ratios, are being raised to 70% and 60% respectively. This means home buyers would be able to borrow up to $340,000, up nearly $100,000 from the current total when buying a house worth $488,000. They'll also feel less pressure to turn to non-banking institutions that charge them higher interest rates. The policy has already started to bring some vitality into the housing market. The number of housing transactions in Seoul shot up in July, which is traditionally an off month for home buying. The Financial Supervisory Service says the amount of housing mortgage loans increased by 80% in June from the previous month to $475 million, the highest amount in 12 months. But the moves are also being met with concern. It's feared the deregulatory moves may lead people in their 50s or older into more debt. Last month, the amount of housing mortgage loans for people in those older age groups increased an average of 20% from 2 years earlier. This according to data from Korea's 4 major commercial banks. They were apparently trying to pay back debt accrued from self-employed businesses and from losses incurred after failing to sell houses amid falling prices. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
The Korean government says it's raising its R&D budget to $12.1 billion next year, up more than 2% from this year's. This will be channeled to 3 major sectors: 1, space technology; 2, disaster prevention research; and 3, future growth engines. And for the very first time ever, $1 billion of the budget will be earmarked for individual researchers for development of new technologies. Samsung Electronics has posted some very disappointing second quarter figures on the back of weakening smartphone sales and the strong Korean won. The tech giant's second quarter operating profit was down 24.5% on year, coming in at just under 7.2 trillion Korean won, which is a touch over $7 billion. Its sales also slumped nearly 9% on year. Korea's Google, Korea's biggest web search engine, had a banner second quarter. Naver recorded significant rises in its operating profit on strong overseas sales driven by its messenger application Line. Hwang Jie has the details.
It seems Naver, Korea's #1 portal operator, has solidified a corner on its market. The company's second quarter profit rose 39% from a year earlier to 191.2 billion won, or roughly $186 million. The rise runs counter to the 30% drop in operating profit recorded by local competitor Daum Communications in the second quarter, and operating losses from the nation's third largest web portal player, SK Communications. With a firm hold on the domestic market, Naver is now looking overseas with its messenger application service, Line. Overseas sales driven by Line took up more than 30% of Naver's overall sales for the first time in the April to June period this year. Around 80% of Line's revenue is generated from Japan. Thailand and Indonesia are also big markets in terms of user numbers, while Line has also made inroads in Mexico and the United States. Sales from Line in the second quarter rose 56%.
Well, we seem to have some issues with that report, and we do promise you to have the completed version for our later newscast. Now, moving on, the market share of Korean products in the Peruvian market has jumped 3 notches to 7th since before the two countries' free trade agreement went into effect 3 years ago today. The Korea International Trade Association says Korean exports to Peru have jumped by an average of 15% each year, led by chemical products, which accounted for a 7% market share in Peru last year. China hopes to conclude bilateral free trade talks with South Korea on the sidelines of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit set for November this year. This is according to Korea's Vice Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yeol following his meetings with senior Chinese officials in Beijing this week. But he pointed out that both sides remain far apart on tariff removal for agricultural and industrial goods, and said that he asked his Chinese counterparts to put in more political will in order to meet that schedule. We keep saying Korea is one of the most wired countries, and here's a study that backs it up. Korea's mobile internet usage ratio is the highest in the Asia-Pacific region at more than 70%. Market research firm eMarketer also says Korea will continue leading the mobile internet use in the region through 2018. The average ratio in Asia was lower than 30% this year, but it's expected to expand to more than 38% by 2018. Behind Korea are Australia, Japan, and China, and India was the fastest growing mobile internet market in this region. North Korea has, on 16 different occasions so far this year, conducted missile tests and, of course, drawing international condemnation each time. With the provocations becoming more frequent, the U.S. says it's ready to tighten the screws on the regime, and it's asking the rest of the world to follow suit. Yoo Li-an tells us more.
Washington's point man on North Korea, Glenn Davis, says the United States won't sit back and simply wait on Pyongyang to denuclearize.
We're going to continue to do everything we can, not to sit down and have a coffee clatch with them and try to convince them of the logic of it, but to use pressure, in particular, to point out to them that there's only one way forward. It's the peaceful diplomatic path forward.
The comments came in a hearing held by the House Subcommittee on Asia and the Pacific, where Davies and the U.S. Special Envoy for North Korean Human Rights, Robert King, were questioned for over an hour on the Obama administration's approach to Pyongyang's combative policies. King defended the administration's stance.
We're looking at sanctions. One of the issues that we need to do is try to do whatever we do in concert with other countries. Sanctions by the United States alone are very limited effectiveness.
In the latest round of unilateral measures against the North Korean regime, the United States Treasury Department imposed sanctions on 2 North Korean shipping companies that operated a ship that was seized by Panama last year for trying to transport military equipment in violation of UN resolutions. The renewed emphasis on U.S. policy towards Pyongyang comes on the heels of a series of missile launches by the reclusive state, 16 this year alone. North Korea fired 4 more short-range missiles into the East Sea on Wednesday afternoon. In response, the U.S. Department of Defense said North Korea should stop polluting waters around the country with missiles and focus instead on feeding its own people. Yurian, ARIRANG News.
Seoul is a wonderful city. I live in it, full of modern architecture, bustling streets, and vibrant nightlife. But there is one common criticism leveled at the capital city, which is a lack of green space. Well, now there's a push to make Seoul more green. Connie Lee tells us more.
From the looks of it, it doesn't seem like you're in a busy metropolis. But in the yards of Seoul's various social welfare centers and education facilities, lush green scenery is what you can see. The Welfare Forest Project is a campaign currently underway by the Seoul metropolitan government for more green spaces in the city, especially for those places that need it the most.
If you see a lot of these welfare centers or public interest facilities, their outdoor environment is very poor. But with this project, we want to make those environments more green with a park, garden, or forest.
For instance, at the so-called Dream Tree Village, which consists of an orphanage and a specialized school, some empty space was able to be transformed.
Now this area was once just a field of dirt, creating a lot of dust. But now it has transformed into a very welcoming park.
The kids like to catch many insects here. Also, the teachers like to bring the children out here for a picnic.
Even residents nearby are able to enjoy the park.
There are so many trees here and the air is nice. I feel good and refreshed when I'm here.
It's a city initiative, along with the Korea Forest Service, that started back in 2008. Encouraging different public interest facilities to apply for this funding and have their front yards or backyards transformed. So far, more than 26 facilities in the city have a new garden or park to boast about, with the government now accepting more applications for the year 2015. The deadline to apply for the program for next year is this Friday. Connie Lee, ARIRANG News.
Argentina has defaulted on its debt for the second time in 13 years after failing to reach an agreement with a deal with the U.S. creditors before a deadline. Paul is joining us for more on that story. Paul, Argentina is already in a double-dip kind of recession. Should it be bracing for another economic meltdown?
Well, Latin America's third largest economy is yet again in the red, but analysts say the effects of this fresh default will not likely be as severe compared to its debt crisis in 2011. The Argentine economy minister has blamed the latest breakdown in negotiations on U.S. hedge funds that are demanding a full repayment on its government bonds worth some $1.3 billion. Our Na Hyung-kyung has the details.
His face lined with tension. Argentine Economy Minister Axel Kicillof walks into a press conference in New York after failing to reach agreement on averting his country's second default in nearly 13 years.
This offer is legal for Argentina and doesn't violate our contract's clauses, but was not accepted by the vulture funds. This offer wasn't accepted because evidently they want more, and they want it now.
Global ratings agency Standard & Poor's has downgraded Argentina's foreign currency rating to selective default. Analysts say a default of Latin America's third largest economy is unlikely to have a huge impact on the global economy, but will likely weaken the Argentina peso as more people hold on to dollars. The imminent default stems from a years-long legal battle with two of Argentina's bondholders who had rejected restructured debt agreements in 2002 when the country first defaulted. The Buenos Aires government at present cannot pay other creditors because of a U.S. court ruling last month, which said no creditor can be paid unless the two so-called holdout creditors are paid as well. Kicillof says the country will take all the necessary measures to confront what he referred to as an unfair situation. Na Hyun-kyung, ARIRANG News.
And turning now to West Africa, where several countries have now declared a public health emergency in the wake of this deadly outbreak of Ebola. The first cases of Ebola in this region were confirmed back in February. How far has the virus spread since then?
Well, according to the World Health Organization, there's been over 1,300 suspected cases, with a majority of those across the borders of Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Guinea, and one has escalated into the worst Ebola outbreak on record. The Liberian government announced on Thursday a series of drastic measures to halt the growing epidemic. These included enacting a quarantine on a number of communities, shutting down schools across the country, and closing its borders. A few hours later, Sierra Leone followed suit by dispatching security forces to contain the epicenters of the outbreak. Neighboring countries such as Ivory Coast are also launching campaigns to prevent any potential infections.
Firstly, surveillance and reinforcement of health checks on border posts, putting in place a system of taking charge of patients, then protection measures for healthcare personnel. You know, health workers are on the front line of this battle. We need to put at their disposal all the protection equipment necessary to protect them.
The deadly fever has claimed the lives of more than 670 people this year, and health authorities say that figure is expected to rise. There is currently no cure or vaccine for the Ebola virus, which has a fatality rate of up to 90%.
And over in India, a massive landslide triggered by torrential rains there is feared to have trapped up to, 200 people in the west part of the country. So how are rescue efforts coming along at the site?
Well, India's National Disaster Forces say at least 25 bodies have been recovered from the wreckage that devastated a remote village in the state of Maharashtra. The deadly landslide was triggered after part of a mountain gave way on Wednesday, spilling down a wave of trees, rocks, and mud. Rescue workers have saved 10 residents so far and have been working through the night, digging through the debris for any more survivors. But with several dozen homes still buried underneath, the death toll is expected to rise.
At present, there are 9 teams of National Disaster Rescue Force which are already on the search and rescue job. The total strength of the team is 371 personnel.
Heavy rains and poor road conditions into the rural village are hampering rescue efforts, as is poor communication infrastructure, according to authorities. Environmentalists are blaming deforestation and unchecked industrial development in the region as one of the main causes of the landslide.
And finally, Paul, Hollywood has released a new trailer for the latest film in the Hunger Games series. I'm a big fan of the books and the movies, and that's why you're talking about this, I guess. So what can we expect from this latest sneak peek?
Well, the minute-long teaser was officially released worldwide on Tuesday after its debut on Comic-Con this past week, and it showcases the third installment of the Hunger Games, Mockingjay Part 1. Let's take a look.
Listen to me. No one else can do this but her.
She won't be able to handle it. The games destroyed her.
We need to unite these people out there. She's the face of this rebellion. They'll follow her.
Oscar-winning actress Jennifer Lawrence will be reprising her role as the iconic archer Katniss Everdeen, who eventually leads a rebellion in a dystopian future. Joining her on the journey will be Hollywood star Julianne Moore and the late actor Philip Seymour Hoffman in one of his final on-screen roles. The Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 1 will open in theaters on November 21st, while the fourth and final film in the series will be released in 2015. Charity?
All right, Paul, thank you so much, and thank you for not giving away the spoilers there. We'll see you back here in just about 2 hours for more updates.
Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Kim Bo-kyung with your latest weather update. Heat wave advisories have been extended to more regions. Now, earlier today, the mercury in Gyeongsang City in Gyeongsangbuk-do province soared to 39.9 degrees. And of course, in this heat, it is recommended that young children and elderly refrain from doing outdoor activities. At the moment, we are seeing partly cloudy skies across the country, but some regions are getting heavy sporadic showers, which may continue through later tonight. Jeju and the southern regions will be indirectly affected by Typhoon Nakri, so from tomorrow through Saturday, those in Jeju are looking at 100 to 200 millimeters of heavy downpours, and the southern regions 20 to 60. On to Friday's readings. Seoul soars to 34, Daegu and Gwangju hit 31. As for other places, Jeju and Dokdo make it to 28, Mount Kumgang peaks at 32. That'll do it for now, but I'll be back with more updates after 10. See you then.
Yes, we'll see you then. Thank you very much, Bo-kyung, for that. And that does it for now. Thanks for watching.